Hey there, Phoenixes. Daniela Langford here of Redesign Your Life Forever, and welcome to this episode. And we are talking today about guilt and self-forgiveness. And here I am sitting, just hanging out on my bed, taking a moment for myself, which most people would feel guilty about. Just sitting on their bed, having a relaxing moment, got the fan on. It's hot as all get out outside, and just taking that time for yourself, most people would feel guilty about. You know, guilt is something that is very debilitating, and almost everyone deals with it. I want to say pretty much everybody has to deal with it in some form or another, at some point or another in their lives, and more often than not, it's pretty much everybody. So if you fall into any of these categories, don't despair, because you're definitely not alone. I, myself, struggled with guilt about a lot of things, both real and imagined, for many, many years. And, guilt over having misused, my energetic strength and not realizing it. Guilt over, wanting to delve into that realm, but then, compounding on the guilt of, I've, opened Pandora's box once before and didn't even realize, and that's what happened. So, you just, you can't have that happen again. And, the guilt just compounds on you, and you say, oh my God, how could I ever forgive myself for doing X, Y, and Z? And, this weekend was Mother's Day. And not to bring anything down, but, I want to say almost all of the mothers that I've ever worked with, including in the early days, my own best friends and things, they all, we all struggle with guilt, particularly the moms, over their kids. And I know that that's a huge, huge thing for so many women, is this guilt about, did I raise my kids right? Did I treat them right? Was I terrible to them? Was I a horrible mother? I mean, all of these things, go through your head. So I wanted to make a video and talk about this because I know that it's very important. So today we're going to talk about what it is, how you can recognize it for what it is, and then I'm going to give you 3 tips on freeing yourself from that guilt. 3 tips that you can actually work on today to start freeing yourself from all of this crap. So guilt is a tool that's used primarily by the ego mind, the naysayer in the back of your head, to keep you safe and comfortable and really just, let's be honest, it's keeping you stuck, it's keeping you stagnant, and it's keeping you fearful of moving forward or of approaching someone and getting closure or anything like that. It keeps you stuck. So I mostly see it used in family dynamics, right? Or work dynamics. Hopefully you don't have a lot of friends that guilt trip you a lot of the time, though I totally have been guilty of being that person, and I made amends, which is, we're going to get to that later. So let's see, I find that guilt really is a tool, again, used by the ego mind, but other people have, over the decades and eons have realized that it's a tool of the mind, and that it's a tool that they can use against you. They can use your own mind against you. That's how it works. It's crazy, but it's been passed down. So at this point, if your parents were terrible about guilt tripping you, like ye old Catholic or Jewish guilt, I want to say it's not their fault. I mean, it is, because they weren't self-aware, and, so on and so on and so on. But it is a learned behavior. It is something that is learned and taught and passed down because the children see the parents doing it, and the parents have seen their parents doing it, and so on and so on and so on and so on, to get what they want. So that was why I feel I primarily see this dynamic in families. It's because that's what's been passed down. That's what's been taught. That's what's been taught is the appropriate mechanism of communication to get something out of somebody, instead of just saying, hey, could you, when you have, instead of any other way that you could approach it. So the mind uses guilt to keep you in, again, that safe zone, but by keeping you in a perpetual guilt, punishment / atonement cycle. Because you know, in your head, again, it goes with the whole naysayer and beating yourself up constantly. You have that guilt, you know, especially again, talking about mothers, you know, guilty about anything, X, Y, and Z. I mean, I've seen so many reasons, just, you know, not being there for their kids, you know, being there too much, being a helicopter parent, you know, not providing enough, you know, just feeling inadequate in some way about being a mother. And this, again, affects everybody. So it's the moms and it's everybody. But it's a punishment cycle that we put ourselves through, a rinse and repeat punishment cycle, because your brain gets to going on you and it says, oh, well, you've done all of these terrible things, whether they're actually real or imaginary or not. And it makes you feel in your head like you have to atone, that you have to punish yourself, that there is a necessity for you to suffer, for you to atone, or to, you know, have some sort of repayment, you know, karmically or something, however you believe, for what you supposedly did or didn't do. And that's really the cycle. And it is a terrible rinse and repeat cycle, and one that pretty much everyone falls victim to at some point or another. So now that you kind of know what it is, recognizing it is a whole nother animal. It's very, very tricky a lot of the time, because the guilt communication that has been passed down from generation to generation to generation to generation has been fine-tuned over these many, you know, hundreds, thousands of years of human communication. It has been fine-tuned to be as effective as possible and the least amount of effort on the person who is, you know, the person's part who is trying to use that tool. And again, it's a learned tool, so half the time I want to say the people that are guilting you don't even realize that that is actually the form of communication that they are using. That is just simply the only thing they know how to do. Does it make it right? No. But it does help you identify. Because if you can identify that that literally is the only way they know how to communicate, you can allow it, or not allow it in that case, to affect you as much. So I find in my experience personally, you know, as, you know, an indigo empath, as someone who is sensitive, and working with a lot of other people that didn't even realize they were empathic or, you know, spiritually, energetically sensitive, is that those people, our people, are particularly susceptible to falling into the guilt trap, because we are so sensitive that we feel and take on other people's guilt as our own, on top of what we already feel guilty about, because we are naturally wired. You know, we have a natural tendency to want to keep the peace, and that turns into people pleasing because of the guilt factor, and that turns into a habit because there becomes a habitual exchange there. So one person ends up on the higher end of the stick and the other person ends up on the lower end of the stick. And of course, what's going to happen there is it creates resentment. And then the resentment continues on, and you continue to have not only resentment towards that other person, but then you resent yourself for giving into the guilt. And then that's a whole nother cycle that you feel guilty because you beat yourself up, because you let yourself be fooled or, you know, taken advantage of, or any number of these things that, of course, the ego is making you feel guilty for, which half the time, if not more, probably 70, 80, 90% of the time, is not even realistic. So it's a cycle. You know, it's a very, very deep cycle, a very integrated cycle that most people don't even realize is happening. And again, family is where you see it most, because that's what's been passed down as the communication. So if this sounds like you, if this is ringing a whole lot of bells and throwing up a lot of red flags for you, you're going, hey, what the hell? You're not alone. You're definitely not alone. Like I said at the beginning of the video, almost everyone, of course including myself, struggles with this guilt. Even to this day, you know, you accidentally, you know, run over a curb, or, you know, you do something, this, that, or the other, and the brain immediately, even to this day, for me, will still go into that, oh, well, you shouldn't have done that, and this, that, and the other, and now, you get to feel guilty for it. And it's like, no, and it's a process. It is a training process that will continue because it is so ingrained in our subconscious that it is something that will continue to want to pop up and try and reassert itself, regardless of how many times you tell it no. So it's one of those things that you learn to get to ignore. But on your way to being able to ignore it, here are 3 of the things that I like to introduce to my clients initially to get them started in releasing that guilt from themselves. So you want to recognize the pattern. You want to start to be as self-aware as you can, as often as you can. And when you feel that you are guilt tripping yourself in your head, stop. Stop guilt tripping yourself in your head. Tell your naysayer no. Say thank you for, all the information, but I, choose not to listen to you right now. Whatever you have to say to yourself. That is number 1, is becoming at least self-aware of when it happens. Now, number 2 is kind of twofold, where, if someone's asking you to do something and it feels, wrong, is it wrong? Or, or if you feel resentful doing these things for this person, or if there's a negative energy or some sort of obligation associated with working with this person or this, situation, don't do it. If you can manage it at all, don't do it, because that is just going to perpetuate that negative cycle that you've gotten yourself in already. Because if you continue to go through with it, you're going to feel guilty. You're going to resent the person that you're doing X, Y, and Z for. You're going to continue to resent yourself for, giving in to X, Y, and Z. And it's going to continue and continue and continue. So we've got to break the cycle somewhere. And that comes in with, again, being self-aware and being able to say no. And here's a huge thing, too, that I noticed, that most people are not able to say no without feeling like they have to explain themselves. Because most people, when they're trying to guilt trip you or, get you to do something like that, they are going to interrogate you as to why you made that choice to tell them no. Because that's what their parents did. Because when, they were kids and they said, hey, I didn't want to do this, so on and so on and so on. So you see where this is going. It's a very long cycle, but it's one that you can break yourself out of. Another thing that goes along with number 2, it's kind of like to be, is to be or not to be, is I try to, as much as possible, to encourage you to go, and if you feel like you have done something wrong, or have hurt someone's feelings, or if there's someone that you feel guilt towards, go to them. And this is going to be pretty hard, because I know it was hard for me, because the ego likes to get in the way and say, oh, but go to them and say, hey, I know that I haven't always been as on it, or whatever you want to say, as I, am trying to be now. And I know that, some things have happened, or things, that were said, or, whatever it is. And I want to take this second to apologize to you, because I know that was not right of me to do that. So on and so on. Whatever you want to say, however you want to say it. Because not only in that moment are you apologizing, you are starting to absolve the guilt. Because even if they are not in a place to accept your apology, you have released it from yourself. That is step 1 of self-forgiveness, is to try and make closure and apologize to as many of those people that you feel like you have maybe been the guilter to. And I had to go and do that. One of my best friends ever, she is like my big sister. There were times where I was going through the super, super rough patch in my life, and, she was there for me. And I know that I didn't always treat her with the, respect and understanding that I would have now. So there came a time where, we finally got a chance to sit down, and I said, hey, I know I haven't always been as, on it as I, am trying to be now, and I need to apologize to you because you have been there, you have been my friend, and you didn't deserve that crap. And, and luckily in that case, of course, everything was fine, but she really appreciated the time that it took me and the energy, and, she knew what it took for me to apologize to her, and so that has really improved our relationship even more. So that can happen also. So trying to wrap this up, I know it's kind of getting long here, but this is a really big topic, and you could go on about it forever and ever and ever. So number 3, last one, really quick here, is going to be practicing that self-forgiveness, which I know is the hardest one of the 3, because there is that voice inside of you that says, I do not deserve to be forgiven. Ask me how I know. So there's always going to be, no matter what you do, there's going to be that naysayer voice inside of you that says, I am not worthy of being forgiven. Whatever I have done is so heinous and so terrible that I don't deserve to be forgiven. Even if it is a small infraction, even if it is something that is completely made up in your head or was completely out of your control, the mind is going to try and make you feel guilty for as much stuff as possible, because that's what keeps you safe and in fear and not getting rid of the ego. Because the more spiritual and egoless you get, guess what? It's going to go fighting, kicking, and screaming all the way. So self-forgiveness is super important to practice, especially when you feel those feelings of guilt come up in your head and you say, no, thank you for the lesson, but I now forgive myself, for how I felt, for my actions, for how other people felt, for the whole situation. I forgive myself. And even if you can say that to yourself in a mirror, that's even better. Because if you can look yourself in the face, and this is super hard to do, I know it's super hard to do. If you can look yourself in the face and say, I forgive you, is so powerful. Absolutely powerful. So if anything, you can go right now after this video and go try it. You might actually break out into tears, because there is something that you are touching that is so deep and is so wounded and is begging to be healed that you're going to start to touch on it. And that's what we're here to do, is to get you to touch on it so that we can open that up gently and we can start to heal all of these wounds that allow us to continue to be sucked into the guilt. So in my own story, I know this has been a huge thing. It took me a very long time to be able to forgive myself, because again, I felt like I had done something so terrible, opening Pandora's box and, using, my sway, and I was not as, mentally, emotionally healthy, of course in high school, because high school's terrible for most people. Back then I wasn't as, mentally aware and self-aware as I am now, of course. And so they, things happened where, I made myself miserable. I ended up manipulating people as I, was being manipulated by others. And I, took years. It took years to forgive myself for being that person. And it took a lot of work. It took a lot of work. It took a lot of, talking to myself in the mirror. It takes a lot of discipline to start to train your mind out of constantly feeling guilty for things. So if that is something that you are struggling with and you are needing help with, I can absolutely help you with that. I know all about guilt and all of the forms that it takes, and I can spot it immediately, especially in other people. And it's very helpful to have someone be able to point that out to you, because a lot of times we can't see it for ourselves. You can't see the trees for the forest. So I believe I have, let's see, here we go, I gotta count again, always gotta count. So I have 7 spaces available that I would offer to you in this group, you lovely, beautiful women that I know there are many things that you're struggling with, and guilt probably is top of the list. So I would like to offer my time to you. Again, that 45 minutes, that hour where we dive deep and we find out what is causing this guilt. What are you saying to yourself in your head? What are those outside factors? what is going on, because once you can identify, once you've got the knowledge of what it is and where it's coming from and why it's coming from, you can more easily, I don't want to say defend yourself against it, but you can more easily transmute it and work through it, and then no longer have it actually be this huge strenuous part of your life. So in a lot of, my coaching time, I actually, with my regular clients, I spend a lot of time with them working through that guilt and offering the guidance to work through that, because it takes a lot of active practice of self-forgiveness. And that is one of the things that I work with a lot of people on, because it is hard. It's hard to forgive yourself, and it really, almost helps if you get someone else's permission in a way. Your mind then allows you to begin to forgive yourself if you feel like you've gotten permission in a way from someone else who's already been there. So if that feels like something that you are in desperate need of, I am here for you, sister. I am here, and I am ready to help you. So we've got those 7 spots open for you. It is absolutely free to you, as always, to get us started, to see if working together one-on-one would be something that would be a good fit. Because I know a lot of times my energy isn't always for everybody, and everybody's energy isn't always for me. And if that happens, that's A-okay, and we, continue on in the group, or we trot you off to someone that I know can help you better. So click on that link below. I've got it there for you. I offer it to you because I want you to be able to have access to the guidance and the help and the practice, the active practice of having someone hold your hand while you practice these things, so you get used to what it feels like. So that is our spiel today on guilt. And thank you so much for watching. This has been Daniela of Redesign Your Life Forever, and I love you. You have nothing to worry about. We are here for you, and I cannot wait to work with you.